So for those of you who are watching now here in the room, and for those of you who are watching live online, the title of this morning's sermon is Weird Dreams and Strange Visions, Something Light for the Summer Holidays. If you are downloading this talk some point in the week from our website or from YouTube, it will be called Lessons from Daniel Part 2. And last week, as part of our Holiday Club review, we did Daniel 1 to 6, as I said earlier on, and we called that Lessons from Daniel Part 1, looking at the stories that make Daniel a great story for Holiday Club, so the fiery furnace, the lion's den, all that kind of stuff. So that was Lessons from Daniel Part 2, and this is, that was Part 1, this is Part 2. And last week, I encouraged you, if you've never read Daniel, to go away and at least read 1 to 6. And then if you were feeling brave, to carry on to do 7 to 12. And if you did that, or if you've ever read Daniel right the way through from 1 to 12, you will know that there is quite a difference between 1 to 6 and 7 to 12. There's quite a shift in gears as you move from 6 into 7. And chapters 7 to 12, they don't fit chronologically. So far we've just gone through, it's been chronological. But Daniel chapter 7 starts by telling us that in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. And so so the chapters 7 to 12 fit back in to various points in the story that we have already read. And if you've already read 7 onwards, you will know that we come across a number of dreams and visions. There's one in chapter 7, there's one in chapter 8, then we've just read chapter 9, which is kind of a little bit of a break. We've got Daniel's prayer, and then there's these few verses at the end, just in case we were beginning to relax. I think, this is a chapter I can deal with. There was a few 7s chucked in there. And then 10 to 12 is a final vision and the explanation of that, and that takes us right the way through to the end of the book. And these chapters take the form of apocalyptic literature. And when we hear the word apocalypse, our minds probably go to stuff to do with the end of the world. And so there'll be scenes like this kind of on this slide where you might have a Hollywood film where you've got it's the aftermath of a nuclear war, or you've got like one of my favorite film trilogies, The Matrix. It's kind of the aftermath of when AI has taken and robots have taken over the world. There's only a few human beings left, and people are trying to survive. And so that's where our minds go when we hear this word apocalypse. It's all to do with the end of the world. But the word apocalypse actually comes from Greek and has got nothing to do with the end of the world. It literally means revelation, and that's why that's how the book of Revelation starts. The revelation of Jesus Christ, and that word revelation is apocalypsis. So something that has been hidden is now revealed. That's what the word means. And because the book of Revelation mainly deals with the end of the world, that's where that link and that association has come, where we now associate apocalypse with the end of the world. But the Bible has quite a bit of apocalyptic literature. So Revelation, probably most of it, but also you've got Daniel, these parts of Daniel that 7 to 12, but also places like Ezekiel and Isaiah and Zechariah. And they typically involve some kind of weird vision that if you were trying to sit down and paint it and take it literally, you would probably struggle, and certainly whatever you painted will look significantly different to what someone else who just read the same passage painted. There's often weird and wonderful and fantastic animals or dragons or beasts. They start off looking like one thing, but by the end of the story, they look like something else. But apocalyptic literature was quite common at the time in which the Bible was written. It's very symbolic, and so different parts of the vision are supposed to symbolize things, either maybe people or nations or places or events. So they are very symbolic of things that are happening in the real world. And in terms of the apocalyptic literature in the Bible, the thing that they are revealing is that God is inviting us to pull back the curtain and take a look behind what is going on in the world and to see what is really going on in the spiritual dimension. So spiritual truths are being revealed. That is what is the revelation is. And they're not necessarily to do with the end times, although quite a lot of them are. Now, I really like these parts of the Bible. But then I'm the kind of person who likes reading people like, and most of you won't have heard of most of these people, Jasper Fforde, Terry Pratchett, and Tolkien. And so I, for fun, read fantasy books where Balrogs and vampires and angels and bogeymen and human-sized talking rabbits are all part of the story that you read on the surface, but under the surface there is another story going on about something else. Maybe it's a story about the nature of evil, or it's about a story about getting on with people who are different to you, or it's about Brexit, or it's about racism, or immigration, or capitalism, etc., etc., etc. And so you can just read the surface story and enjoy it as a good story. But you might get part way through the book, and suddenly the penny drops, and you realize, actually, this is a story about something else in the real world. And then you think, I should probably go back to the beginning and start again and pay attention to the story that I'm actually supposed to be paying attention to, and not just enjoying the surface story, although I could read the whole book and never realize that it's about anything else other than that surface story. But I do appreciate that for lots of people, these parts of the Bible are very bewildering, they are daunting, and therefore they are parts that we either skip over or we just never read in the first place. And so if you've never read Daniel 7 to 12, can I encourage you to take a bit of time, maybe this week or next week, to just read it. Don't try and make sense of it. Don't worry about it. Just read it. As I say, don't try and work out what it's talking about. Just read it through. And then when you get to the end, you might think, right, I've done what Keith said, and I'm never going to come back to Daniel 7 to 12 again. But you might think, oh, that was interesting. Let me go back and start again. And even if 98% of what you read has gone over your head, and you've got no idea what the beasts are about, you've got no idea what the dragons are about, then ask the Holy Spirit to at least flag up the broad brush strokes as you read. And there are these broad brush strokes that come through this apocalyptic literature again and again. Things like the fact that God is king, that God is the one who is actually on the throne. Empires come and empires go. Their times are ordained by God. Themes like the fact that the rulers of this world are opposed to the kingdom of God, and therefore God's people in this world will experience persecution, but God's people are looking forward to the day when God's kingdom will finally be established, and all of the powers that are opposed to God in this world will be blown away. So those are the broad brush strokes. But if you want to make a little bit more sense of the 95% that's kind of underneath the broad brush strokes, then you are probably going to need some kind of external help. And so, for example, you might be reading Daniel chapter 7, Daniel's dream of 4 beasts. And you might clock that what Daniel is talking about in Daniel chapter 7 might be, the same thing that Nebuchadnezzar's dream was about in Daniel chapter 2. And if you were here last week, I said that Nebuchadnezzar's dream represents the Babylonian Empire, followed by the Medes and the Persian Empire, followed by the Greek Empire, followed by the Roman Empire, and then the rock that comes in and destroys them all is Jesus. So you might clock that, but you don't have enough historical knowledge to know anything more about the Babylonians or the Medes or the Persians, or you might have heard of Alexander the Great, but you've got kind of no idea where he fits into the whole story. And because you've watched Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, you are a little bit of an expert in Greek myth, but you don't know very much. And so you know a little, but you want to dig a little bit deeper. So where do you go next? In this day and age, we might be tempted to turn to AI or to Google or to YouTube. But I suspect that the answers that we get to the questions that we ask are dictated by the algorithm and by our search history and the sort of things that we look at. I was actually quite impressed with the answer that Google gave me to the question, what are the dreams and visions in Daniel 7 to 12 all about? Now, you might not get the same answer as I got, because I look at certain sorts of things on the internet. So the answer I came back with, these chapters in Daniel remind us that God is completely sovereign over human affairs and governments. Daniel sees visions that represent great kingdoms of the world. All of them pale in comparison, however, to the greatness of the kingdom that God will establish and that the Son of Man will rule over. So that's a pretty good answer from AI. I was actually quite impressed with it. But one of the problems with the internet is that on the internet, anyone can say anything about anything they want, and you've got no idea, however convincing they sound, you don't actually know whether what they're saying is true, whether it's biblical, whether it's based in any kind of research or whatever. It could just be somebody saying whatever they want and claiming that this is the truth. Unsurprisingly, when it comes to understanding the dreams and the visions in Daniel 7 to 12, a bit like the stuff in Revelation, there are different interpretations. And Christians who take the Bible seriously and who know Greek, know Hebrew, know Aramaic, they come to different interpretations. And so there's a range of interpretations that different people have come to. And so another danger of the internet, but not just the internet, is that we only get one perspective. We get somebody who says, this is what it means, and they don't flag up at all that actually other Christians have 2 or 3 other different views. And so we might be totally aware that there are different views that different Christians take. And so we want to be looking for resources that we trust. And we also need to be looking for resources that aren't afraid to say things like, this is what I believe, but other Christians believe this for this reason. Other Christians believe this for this reason. And still other Christians believe this for that particular reason. Now, I've talked before about the Bible Project, and I'm fairly confident to say that the Bible Project is an online resource that we as Christians can trust. And it's a great place to start when you're asking questions about the Bible. You'll find them at www.bibleproject.com. And one of the things that they've got is overview videos, 7, 8, 9 minutes long, where they draw out these pages, kind of they talk through it, and the whole thing draws out of every book in the Bible. And so they've got one of Daniel, and that will help us understand what the book of Daniel is about. They've also got, as part of their Reading the Bible series, they have got a video on how to read apocalyptic literature. And so that's on there as well. You will, on the church website, if you go to resources, helpful links, you will find links to the book. I think there's at the moment 3 different links on there to the Bible Project. One of them will take you to the Old Testament section, and you can scroll down and find the Daniel vision, the video. One of them is on reading the Bible, and you can scroll right to the bottom. It's the last one in that section, and you'll find the video on apocalyptic literature. Now, another resource that I find really helpful is a good study Bible. I got a couple with me this morning if you wanted to come and have a look at them. And there are lots of different study Bibles available. You can get study Bibles for men, study Bibles for women, study Bibles for children, study Bibles for youth. So there are lots of different ones, but they are, this is the one I use. This is the ESV, the English Standard Version Study Bible. It's a bit thicker than a normal Bible because although it's got all of the Bible text in it, so it is a Bible, but it also has lots of extra information and extra notes on the whole of the Bible, so you don't need to go and buy a whole load of other books. It's all kind of there in one handy place. There are charts, there are maps, there's articles, there's all sorts of extra interesting stuff in there. Now, I'm not expecting you to be able to read this. You'll be glad to know. But this is the page from this study Bible of Daniel 9:24 to 25. So the bit in red are those 2 verses, Daniel 9:24 and 25. And then all of that small print underneath is extra notes on those 2 verses. Now, not every page is like that. Most pages have more of the Bible text and a few little notes at the bottom. But one of the things that they've done is they've gone through and they've listed out the main 4 ways that different Christians understand the 7 sevens and the 62 sevens and all of that stuff. If you're more into charts, don't worry, because you just turn over the page and there's a chart which lays out with a timeline and how the weeks fit in with things like the exile and Jesus and the second coming and all of that. And if you like maps and you want to know, well, what did the Assyrian Empire look like, or what did the Babylonian Empire look like, there are maps which show you that sort of thing. And then there's this chart which goes through, if you were interested in the actual names of the different leaders of these different empires and where they fit in terms of Daniel chapter 11, there's stuff there. But I'll leave that at the front and you can come and have a look at it if you are interested. And so if I was trying to actually make a little bit more sense of the visions and dreams in Daniel, or I was reading some of the weird stuff in Revelation, then that's the 2 of the places I would start, the Bible Project and my study Bible. But I'd also encourage us not to get too bogged down in the detail, because as I say, the main point is the broad brush strokes that these authors want us to understand. God is in control. God is on the throne. Empires in the world, they are opposed to God, and therefore God's people will experience persecution. But if we remain faithful, then God wins in the end, and God's kingdom will be established. Just a few words on Daniel's prayer from Daniel chapter 9. You probably can't read that either. But Daniel tells us he was reading Jeremiah, almost certainly what we call Jeremiah 29:10 to 14, where Jeremiah is making it clear that the exile is only going to happen, it's only going to last for 70 years. And Daniel works out, well, he's almost been in exile. He's been in exile pretty much most of his life. It's that time is coming soon. And so Daniel prays and repents and confesses and is preparing his heart for the events when God takes his people back to Jerusalem. And if you don't want to read Daniel 7 to 12, at least go back and read some of Daniel chapter 9, Daniel's prayer, because there's lots of good stuff in there that Daniel pulls out. God is faithful to his word. All the things that have happened to Israel have happened because God has done the things that he said he would do. God had told the people, if you do this, this is going to happen. If you do that, that is going to happen. So God is faithful. And yet, in spite of their rebellion, God is merciful and God is forgiving. The people don't deserve anything. Daniel is throwing himself on the mercy of God. They're not depending on their own goodness. They're not depending on their own righteousness. They're depending on God's love and God's mercy, as we do. And then when Gabriel turns up and starts talking about these 77s or these 70 weeks, we find in there a hint of Jesus in verse 24, the end of sin, the atonement for wickedness, the everlasting righteousness. And so even though in verse 26, the righteous one will be put to death, again, giving us hope, pointing forward to Jesus. But what does Daniel say, or what does Gabriel say about the one who will set himself up against God? It says, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of the sevens, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering, and at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation. So that's the sort of detail that you'll find in a commentary or in some of the notes at the bottom of the page in here. What on earth is all that talking about? There'll be various suggestions. But the important thing is, even if we don't get that bit, until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. And as we read through 7 to 12, we need to be kind of just clocking these sorts of phrases, until the time that is decreed, or until the time came, or until the Ancient of Days comes, or his power will be taken away, or at the appointed time. These little hints and clues that no matter how powerful these people think they are, all of the times are in God's hands, and each person has been given an appointed time. Things might even get worse, but none of that is a surprise to God, because a time is coming when God will put an end to it all and his kingdom will be established once and for all. And for me personally, these sorts of passages, the passages in Revelation, they give me real hope when we live in a world that sometimes seems to be totally out of control. A world where there are times when you watch the news and you can't believe the things that you're seeing and the things that you are hearing, where the rich and the powerful seem to be able to do whatever they want and they get away with it again and again and again, because passages like this invite us to pull back the curtain and to look behind the scenes and to see what is really happening. It might seem as if the world is out of control. It might seem as if the rich and powerful can do what they want, but God is the one who is on the throne. Jesus died that we might be a part of God's kingdom, and Jesus is coming again, and everything will be put right. Let's pray.